Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are doing the intro to logs in the SOC tier 2 or level 2 path. I did not expect them to come out with the SOC level 2 as fast as they did, so now we're going to have to do them side by side because I was going to knock out SOC 1, but they came out with it like weeks after they came out with level 1. They came out with level 2. So anyway, let's go ahead and hop into it. If you guys like this content, please hit that sub button. It helps out a ton. We got to 5K this year. I'm so stoked. Thank you guys so much. Also, if you guys want to see like my notes and some of the walkthroughs and stuff, go ahead and hit that Patreon and join there. You'll get access to all the notes. You also will get access to one-on-ones and things like that with me. Keep in mind, I'm still banned from Hack the Box, so I cannot upload walkthroughs or anything like that. So there is no Hack the Box stuff on there. I only ask because people have asked me about it. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first things first, what is logging, right? Obviously everyone should know what logging is. I don't know why they're using this because it's kind of confusing, but basically logging is a record of everything on your machine, everything that's happening or happened. So it's a history of your machine, right? It's keeping record of your machine. Now, comprehensive understanding of logs is crucial. This is true if you are a level 2 SOC analyst or engineer or whatever it is. Now, a lot of people ask me what's the difference between a level 1 level 2 because some companies won't say like, hey, this is a level 1, this is a level 2. Like, I get it. What really the difference only is experience and skill set. What I mean by that is a level 1 might be a senior level a level 1 might be a regular or junior level person. A level 2 might be a senior level person, and they have a lot of experience and they're expected to dive into deeper problems and deeper incident response cases and things like that. They're not going to be handling as surface level stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so one thing, here's the machine that they have us looking at logs for, and they say here the heart of the logs is, I get they tried to go with a log theme here. I think this could have been explained way differently. I don't really love the ring thing because it kind of gives you the impression that like these all build on each other, which they kind of do, but you get them all, like if you find the log, you get the timestamp and the source and all that and all that stuff at the same time. It's not like you have to get the timestamp and then get the unique identifier, then get the source, then get the so that's the only reason I'm not a huge fan of it. I understand what they're saying because if you know the time, that's the first thing you need to track down. I get how they're building it out. I just think it could have been executed a little bit better, but you guys know me. I'm just very critical because I want the best content. I think Tryhackme does an amazing job for teaching people. So I actually really, really, really respect Tryhackme. It feels like this one was kind of pushed fast. Okay, so this information is typically stored in a log file, which is correct. So the biggest thing to take away here is the timestamp, okay? You need the timestamp and it needs to be accurate. We're going to cover that a little bit more, but the reason is all of your different log sources, right? Let's say you do have an incident. All of your different log sources will be in different time formats. Hopefully, they're never in the different time zones, but they're in different time formats. That's important because you have to then convert them to the correct time format that you're going to use and make sure that at that time they coincide. So for instance, somebody has an intrusion into my system, they came in through the firewall, whatever. I check the firewall logs, and the firewall logs is an epoch time, right? Then I check the Windows event logs on the machine they took over, and that's in that's in UTC time. Okay, well now we have two completely different time formats, and we need to know what happened, right? So we have to convert them and then look and say, okay, at this time this happened, right? All right. So the true power, contextual correlation. So this is an example of what happened, when did it happen, where did it happen. So based on suppose a student allegedly accessed inappropriate content on a university network. So they got access to something they shouldn't have. By reviewing the logs, the sysad could answer these questions. What happened? An adversary was confirmed to have access to Swift Spend Financial GitLab instance. When did it happen? It started at 22:10 a.m. Okay. Where did it happen? It originated from this IP. Okay. Who's responsible? Upon examining the network, it was observed that the device identified as XYZ is responsible. Now, keep in mind, this is just looking at logs, but then you would correlate this and say, okay, who owns this IP, right? Because they said this one, for instance, was a student. They may have a student computer that is assigned this IP that you can then go back and say this is the student, things like that. Since an API key was found to be publicly exposed on more of the web proxy, were they successful? Okay, yes, so they were successful. What is the result of their action? The adversary achieved remote code execution. Okay, so that's pretty bad. So the one thing I will say this is saying a student allegedly accessed inappropriate content. This is something, unfortunately, in my experience, I see more often than I actually see a fully successful attack from the outside. What I mean is I don't see insider threats all the time where people are literally like trying to be malicious. Let me get in there and let me blah blah. But I see all the time, most of the investigations I've done in my career are people that are accessing stuff they shouldn't. Whether they're accessing financial information or whatever. And it's not even always bad, malicious people. It's people that are being snoopy. They want to see. They said, oh, I can see this. Let me get in there, right? Ooh, I can do this. Don't do it, because if you're at work, guess what? Someone's going to investigate if they find out. And that's going to be me. And when I investigate, unfortunately, I've seen more times than not, people lose their job because they just were nosy. So be careful. Now, here's another thing I wanted to cover. So they have us open this note right here. Let's see if it's already open, because this VM is so slow. Okay, so it's already open. Hey, Damien, I figured you'd remote into this web server after the call with SecOps regarding the ticket, and I wanted to give you some additional context. Now, one thing I've seen a lot is I've seen people kind of hate on, not necessarily Tryhackme, but these type of things where they say, I like it, I get it, but the problem is I would never actually get a note on a thing, blah, blah. I will tell you, when I was a sysad, this is exactly how we communicated with each other. It sounds silly, sounds dumb, but no regular user should be logging into a server, right? Remoting into it. Only the sysads would be doing that. So I would leave a note up like this. I wouldn't even have it. I wouldn't have it on the dashboard or on the desktop like this. I would have it up like this, and I would write out to the next sysad that I know is going to come in here. And I would say, hey, heads up, da-da-da, I did this, da-da-da, Zach. And I would go home, right? And then the next sysad might come in, and when he remotes in, he says, okay, I got you, I'm with you, right? It's a way that it doesn't have to save it. I wouldn't have to save it to the desktop. I can leave it running. So this is extremely common. So this is common. It is something that could happen, and I want you guys to be aware of that. So what's the name of your colleague who left a note on your desktop? Perry. Perry is right there. He signed it for us. Awesome. He told us where the actual logs are that we need. Okay, so what is the full path of the suggested log file? Well, he suggested that we first start with this access log. Okay, cool. So we've now got a location. Okay, so now what type of logs are there? And we've covered this in the in some of the previous boxes we've done, in the defensive boxes, but there's application logs. These are messages about specific applications. So this might be however the application is built, whatever logging it is bringing to the table, these are the logs, right? They can send them out that way. Then you have audit logs, activities related to operational procedures, crucial for regulatory compliance. So keep in mind also one thing I didn't say, logs are only as good as you make them. What I mean by that is some people turn off a lot of logging because it fills up so much information, right? You got to store this information. It's got to be stored somewhere. So if you have all your logging enabled, which a lot of newer cybersecurity people say, hey, let me enable all logging, right? The problem is now you have terabytes of data that you have to store somewhere, and it's going to cost you lots of money to store. So you have to play that game. You have to say, okay, I'm going to enable access logs, but I'm not going to enable this, right? Or I'm going to enable this, but I'm not going to enable this. And you have to do this, and you have to figure it out, right? So this is kind of where your risk appetite comes in. How willing are you to risk certain things? What are your bigger risks? What do your threat modeling? What is considered the high risk for you? Okay, So now you go to application logs, you have audit logs, security logs. This is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Security logs, events such as logins, permission changes, firewall, so things that security should be doing. Server logs, various logs a server generates, including system events, errors, access logs. So this could be something simple. The server, you had an IIS server and it didn't start up correctly, right? That could be in the server logs. But then again, you might have access logs because you might have that IIS server that has a login and it's going to tell you who's logging in, right? Those type of things. System logs, kernel activities. This is based on your actual hardware. So what I mean by that is you might have a Windows server and then an IIS server. The Windows server is going to handle, or the system logs are going to handle the Windows server logs, but the IIS portion, the server logs might handle. Now, network logs. This is exactly what it sounds like. Anything going on the network, right? Network traffic, connections, anything like that. Database logs. Again, this is like I said, if you have a login or you have a SQL database, anything like that, and it's reaching back and forth to get information, this is where it's going to log that information. And then web server, this is actually what I was talking about with the server logs, but this is a specific type of server log. So requests processed by a web server, including URLs, response codes, etc., blah, blah, blah. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, we have log formats. This is something you don't necessarily have to literally know the name of, meaning if you see this log, I don't necessarily need you to say it is a Windows Event Log EVTX format, right? You could Google that in 2 seconds. Like you could be like, hey, what's a Windows, or what is? You could even say what is the log formats, and get this and look at it and say, okay, cool. Now, I will tell you, you will see these formats a lot, but you don't have to memorize the names. So semi-structured logs, that's these, right? They're semi-structured. They look. You got some structure here, but they're not like super user-friendly to read. Now, you might read this and say, yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty friendly. But the problem is if you have thousands of these all at the same time, it's just going to be line, and you lose some of this. So that's why you kind of need to see it. Now, Windows event logs, you can see are pretty easy, right? Time, ID, display name, message. Okay, cool. Semi-structured, not insanely structured, but semi-structured. Okay. Now you have structured logs. The reason they're called structured logs, because you might say, well, this one doesn't look as structured as this one, right? Well, yes, but the thing is, these are structured in a way, these are comma-separated values sheet. I can import these to other things. I can take the CSV and I can upload it, download it, import it, do whatever, and parse this data the way it is. The reason is I can parse it because it's structured, meaning every log is going to show me, okay, the time has its own time field, right? Yes, this has time created, but it's not the same. So you can see these are structured in a way that I can parse the data easily. That's the whole purpose. Now, JSON is super simple to read as well. So you can see this is just structured in a way that you can use it in JSON code if you need it. Again, parsing, that's the only thing they're doing. Then you have W3C, extended log format, same thing, World Wide Web Consortium, customized for web server logging. Again, this is IIS server logging, so structured parsing. That's what the whole point of structured format is a way for us to manipulate the data in a way that doesn't change the data, but also gives us what we need, right? If I say, hey, I need all the dates, I can easily pull all the dates from this. Now, unstructured, this is just exactly what it is. It's just a splurge of information, and you have to kind of go through and figure out what it is for yourself. Like you can see here, here's the IP, but if I don't know computers, I don't know that that's an IP, right? Maybe that's the time format. Maybe it's obviously the time format's right here, but okay, what's this GET request? Like obviously I can break it down and look at it, but it doesn't say time is this, log information is this. It doesn't, user agent is this. It doesn't say that. So I'm just having to look at raw data. Okay, based on the list of log types in this task, what log type is used for log file specified note task 2? Well, if you remember in the note task 2, we have this access log, okay? Well, what format is that? That's what they're asking. Well, let's go ahead and open it up and take a look. And we'll go ahead and go back because we never did open it. But we'll go ahead and open the file. We'll say cat var log GitLab and then nginx access.log. So we'll cat it. I'm just going to stop it. Okay. And then we can look at the actual format. So the format you can see is, okay, IP, time, it's a post authentic or a post request. Okay, that looks a lot like this one, right? IP, time, get request, error code. Okay, that looks a lot like that to me. So we say, based on the list of what type of log file is it, it's a web server log. And we know that because we're looking right at it. It's a web server. Based on the list of log formats in this task, what log format is it? So what format is it? It's NCSA combined log format. So combined. Okay, log collection. Let's go ahead and talk about log collection. So this is probably one of the most important parts of logs. A lot of people see like system event viewer and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, I can do this. But the problem is doing that on scale, meaning I have a system event viewer and I need to do an investigation, but I have 10,000 machines to go through and figure out, which ones talk to this IP address. How do we do that? Log collection. So this is where they're talking about NTP, Network Time Protocol. Every machine has to be on the same time zone. Otherwise, when I say time zone, I just mean they all have to sync up to the NTP server. The reason for this is because if your machine is on, 5 p.m. and my machine's on 3 p.m. and an event happens, my time says 3, yours says 5. Okay, how do I know when it happened? What if I'm looking at 3 p.m.? I'll never see what happened over here. They have to be the same so that when I'm looking, I know the event occurred around 5 p.m. When I'm looking at the logs, your logs at 5 p.m. and my logs at 5 p.m. are the same thing. They happen at the same time. I know what's going on. So they're showing you here how to manually update that. I will tell you, most Windows machines, I say most because there's probably a weird circumstance out there, but all Windows machines I've ever worked with, they have to be on the same time if they're on a domain. If they are off time, won't work. They don't work. So just keep that in mind that most domain controllers will handle the time. Or they'll have an NTP server somewhere or something that'll handle the time. But long story short, there should be all in the same time. But it is something you want to check when you're bringing, especially if you're bringing like third party or you have like a one-off server or something that's not on the domain, it's just off by itself. Make sure that time syncs up, because I have seen that become an issue, especially with cloud-based, because you might have a cloud application and you have no idea what time zone it's in or whatever. You need to make sure you know what time zone that's in and be able to correlate those logs. Okay, so now log management, storage, organization, backup, and review. All right, perfect. So storage, where are we going to store these logs, right? We need a centralized system. Okay, so we're talking about centralization. So log storage, right? Depending on what regulations, what different auditing and all these different things you may fall under, you may have to store these for a long time. For instance, in financial institutions, most of the time they have to store them for the life of the customer. Well, what if you're a customer that has had business there for 20 years and you're 40, right? You may have to store them for 40 more years. Okay, so you need somewhere to store these, right? And you need it to be affordable, you need it to be reasonable, you need to be able to get the data back, you need all these different things you have to consider. So now that's where organization comes. So if I'm storing all this stuff, I have to organize it in a way that I can, if I need to grab it, I can, and it makes sense, right? Backup. This is exactly what you should do with everything. Regularly back up your logs to prevent data loss. So why do we do this besides the fact that you could have some power outage or something and lose all your stuff? Well, what if an attacker comes in to your system and actually changes those logs, right? He's been in your system, he's been messing around, tinkering, whatever. And then when he's done, he goes and tries to delete all his stuff, right? He's like, I'm getting rid of this. Well, you're regularly backing them up and sending them off to a SIM or something. Guess what? Everything he's changing is logged before and it's backed up. So now you just say, okay, well, this log doesn't match this log. Clearly he changed them. And that's one just use case that this could happen. Now, periodically review logs to ensure they are correctly stored and categorized. This means periodically review the logs, but also periodically review the processes you have in place and make sure that you can restore those backups. Make sure that you can get data from them if you need to. I can tell you, I've seen some logs that are needed where they come back and say, hey, this happened 30 years ago and it's just now coming to light. We need those logs. I've seen that. So keep that stuff in mind, that you may need to pull these logs years and years down the road. Okay, so choose a centralized system. Centralization is exactly what it sounds like. You're taking all the logs, putting them in one spot. This helps out tremendously because, again, like I said, if you just had single event logs on each machine and that's it, and then you had to go to each one to get them, it would be in chaos. You'd never get them. It'd be impossible, because what if I'm trying to review the entire network? I'm not going to be able to manually log into 10,000 machines and pull the event logs and look at them and do all this. It would just be impossible. Now, integrate sources. Connect all your log sources to this centralized system. That's part of the system, right? You figure out the system you want to store them in. Now you start pulling them in and aggregating them. Then you set up monitoring. This is where you say, hey, if anybody runs a PowerShell script that reaches out and has a reverse shell, right? I want alerted on that right away, right? Those type of things. If anybody is at 2 a.m. running this when our work hours are 8 to 5 and nobody should take their computer home, I need to know about that, right? Those are things you want to start monitoring. And then integration with incident management. Pretty simple. You should be getting an alert from your logs. Something occurred. Who knows what it is? And then you automatically have an incident management plan, right? It's already going. So that's the whole point. That's what logs are for. Now, practical activity, log collection with our syslog. So we're going to do this practical activity. I'll tell you, this machine over here is super slow. So because it's so slow, I've already done these, but I'm going to prove it and show you guys. So here it's, I mean, literally you follow the steps word for word. Open the terminal, ensure our syslog is installed. Ours is. And then create a configuration file. So we're just going to cat it to show you. Etsy our syslog. Well, maybe. Our syslog. Why is it not? Oh, there we go. That's why. Okay. And I'll move this over here because I know you guys can't hardly see it. But you can see how slow that is. Like how laggy it even is. Come on. All right. Our syslog. And then we have our syslog.d, and then we have 98 web server SSH conf. If I hit Etsy, and you can see I've already put this in here. File, create, all that jazz. So it's already in here. Okay, so that's perfect. I'm also going to move my camera down over here so that you guys can see, and then I'll show you the. I'll move it back so you can see. Okay, we've got it in there. That's perfect. So now what's it saying? Save and close the configuration, restart it. Perfect. Verify the configuration. Check the log file after a minute or two. Okay, so you can see we put in here to actually take the program SSHD and log it to var log web server rsyslog. Okay, so now we just need to look at the log because it says check it in a few minutes. So we can say cat var log web server 02 rsyslog. sshd.log. Okay, we cat it and we look, and it says here, after configuring rsyslog, what username repeatedly appears in the sshd logs? Okay, it looks like our user, invalid user, Stan Simon. And I can make this wider so that it makes sense. So the name is Stan Simon. So we type in Stan Simon and boom. So this Stan Simon is continuously trying to guess a password. They're brute forcing, right? Well, if we thought somebody was doing this, we should have an alert already in place that says, hey, if somebody tries to log in more than 3 times, alert me, right? So this would be then part of your incident management plan. You'd look, you'd say, okay, first off, Stan Simon is trying to log in from this IP. Okay, well, while we investigate this, just block this IP real fast, and then let's start looking at it, right? That's where you'd start your incident management plan. You have a plan in place. We got to start figuring it out now. Okay, what's the IP address of the SIM02 based on the rsyslog? Okay, based on a different configuration. So we say cat etsy rsyslog.d99, and then this is the cron configuration. So this is the logging for all the scheduled tasks. And you can see here is for logs to sim. And then here it is at 10, 10, 10, 10, 0, 101. Bingo. So you guys can kind of see those answers. There you go. 10, 10, 10, 01. I guess it makes more sense for my camera to be like right here, huh? Okay. Now, based on the generated logs in var, log, web server, rsyslog, cron, what command is being executed by the root user? Okay, so now it looks like there is a cron job or cron job, which is a scheduled task. Let's see what it's actually doing. So we say cat var log web serve 02 rsyslog cron log. Okay, and we look at it. Okay, so these are logs. Now, it's very odd that the root user is running basically a reverse shell. Now, the question is it actually a real scheduled task? And I know that sounds crazy because you're like, well, why would that ever be a scheduled task? Maybe it is. Maybe there's a reason for it. So before you just go and delete it, I'm not saying don't block it or anything like that. You will have an incident management plan. That's your guys' whole thing, is you should have at a company an incident management plan. You should know, if I see something like this, here's how I'm going to respond, right? Now, if this is the root user, so that's a little bit different because that's not an actual user, like it's not a person. But if that was a person that was doing that, you may want to go reach out to them right away and say, hey, is this actually you or not? If it's not you, we know something's up. If it's you, why are you doing this? Because there may be an admin that has to do this for something, right? It may be a quick thing. Now, I'm not saying just trust him on his word. Maybe go do some investigating, but at least you know for the time being, you're not infiltrated from the outside. Now, you can see this has an actual different IP. So if it was an outside IP, then okay, yeah, I get it. But you should have an incident management plan here. So that's why logging is so important, because you can find stuff like this and stuff that you didn't even know existed just by setting up good logs. Now, log retention. So here is reasons why you might need log retention. Now, I'll tell you, and it says the choice of log retention typically depends on multiple factors, which is true. So security requirements. So if you have some sort of regulatory compliance requirement right off the bat that says, hey, I have to store logs for 10 years, that's going to change how you store them for sure. And then you can say accessibility needs. How quickly do I need to pull them in, right? Storage capacity, cost considerations, compliance regulations, which is what I talk about with security regulations as well. Retention policies. What's your company's retention policy? How long do you have to keep them, right? And then DRPs, disaster recovery plans. So where are we storing them based on our disaster recovery plan? Now, I will tell you, the reason these considerations have to be considered very seriously from a business perspective is because the cost is going to change dramatically. So for instance, it says here, cost considerations and accessibility needs. Okay, those are two things you have to consider. Well, what if the logs you're storing have to be stored for multiple years? Okay, well, things like AWS Glacier, if you've ever used it, it's extremely cheap for storage, but you can only access it so many times a year. The reason for that is because it's long-term storage, not regular storage. You might use something else for storage if you need it like all the time, right? You might use a different AWS product. You might use a database. You might use whatever. But the point is, those type of things, cost comes into play, because they might say, here's your budget. And you go to AWS, like, oh yeah, it's only this much money. And you're like, oh shit, that's way under budget. We're awesome. But then you look and you need to access the data all the time. And now your cost goes way up because that's not what that storage is for. So keep that in mind. So now you have hot storage. This is logs from past 3 to 6 months. Hot storage is basically a site. Your storage is right there. You can just grab it anytime you want. Boom, 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 boom. Then you have warm storage. Warm storage, 6 months to 2 years. What this is basically, hey, we've got it sitting over there. We can get it if we need to, but we're not accessing it all the time, right? And then cold storage. These are compressed logs, meaning that some of the information is going to be gone, but you're still going to have the general idea. And then you can also, restore them if you need to, but realistically, you shouldn't be accessing these that often. Now, log deletion. This like it says right here, log deletion must be performed very carefully because you may delete something that you don't realize is actually important. You don't want to do that. So this is where you need to really understand your environment and understand what logs are you pulling, okay? So maintain a manageable size of logs for analysis. Comply with privacy. This is the big one. Comply with regulations because you can get fined if you don't have logs that you say you were logging, right? Keep that stuff in mind. Also keep in mind that these logs start to grow tremendously. Meaning if I enable something, it could really start costing me a fortune if I enable logging on something that I think is a good idea, but then the cost is skyrocketing because I'm storing terabytes of data that have to be stored in a hot site, right? Those type of things, keep that in mind because those are the things that the business and security as a whole need to work together on. Now, practical activity, log management with log rotate. So I already set this up for you. We can go ahead and cat it if you don't believe me. So cat, Etsy, log rotate. And for those of you that might say, well, why'd you set them up for us? Because then we won't get to see you do it. You are literally copying and pasting this. You don't need to see me copy and paste. So you can see, there it is, copy and paste. It gives you word for word instructions. So then you manually exploit, or I say exploit, manually rotate the logs. If you don't know what log rotating is, it's taking those logs, compressing them. So like this, they're using gzip, compressing them, and then storing them. So the storage is much, much smaller. You can see they have the size here actually for you. And you can see the size is 108 versus, and they don't have, oh, here's the, they don't actually have the one. And then they have the hashes saved as well. So that way you can correlate. Now, this is a good way to do this, but I will tell you on a large scale, you wouldn't do this on an individual machine, but you will have log rotation in place. So you can see cat, Etsy, and actually we'll just do the ls because I'll show it to you guys. So we'll say ls la and we'll say var log web server 02, and you can see here we have the rsyslog cron log and the ssh logs, and you can see this one is compressed and this one is not. You can see how much bigger it is. So that's a huge difference. So you may have it set up to rotate however often you want. Here you can see they keep 30 rotations, meaning 30 backups, okay, which may seem like a lot to you, but they take daily logs. So what this means is they're only keeping 30 days of logs. They're just keeping them rotated, meaning every day the logs go in, they get at the end of the day, they compress them, okay, which keep in mind you could lose data, not important data, but you can lose some of the data when you really start compressing these logs. So you compress them, they're now stored in a much smaller format, and then the next day's logs start. Then the next day they compress them, next day's logs start. Now, if I needed those logs from 2, 3, 4 days ago, I could unzip them, check them out, stuff like that, but they're not taking up all the storage in my system. This is super important. Now, based on the log rotate, so now they have another file for us to look at. They have Etsy, log rotate, and then they have this one for the 99 web server. So they did this configuration file themselves, and they said, okay, based on this configuration file, how many versions of the old compressed files are they going to keep? And you can see right there, 24 configurations. And then how long, or what's the rotation frequency hourly. So what's that mean? They're going to keep 24 hours of logs because they're going to rotate them every hour and they're keeping 24 of them. So pretty simple, pretty easy. Okay. So now this one, they're just talking about the log analysis process. So they're talking about data sources. Data sources are where you're getting logs from. Parsing is taking this data and putting it into a manageable and understandable format so that you can actually read it and you don't have to just sit there and look at millions of lines of words and hope you find it. Normalization, this is standardizing that parsed data. You've taken the data you want and you're standardizing it so that you know what you're looking at. Then sorting. Sorting is pretty simple. If I want to say, hey, here's the accounting department, I want their logs over here. Now, that you wouldn't actually sort this way, I'm just using it as an example. Here's your HR department, I want these logs over here. You're sorting them, you're getting them where you want them so that way you know what to look for. Usually you would say like, okay, web server logs over here, whatever, blah, blah. but it's just a way, it's an example that people can understand. So classification, this is depending on what data is in that log, right? You may need to keep that log encrypted because that log might actually have passwords in it, or it might have something else in it, PII in it that you need to make sure it's hidden. So you would classify those logs and say, hey, this is classified information, keep these logs safe. Enrichment, this adds context to the logs, making them more meaningful. So it can involve adding information like geographical data. So taking these logs and saying, hey, these logs are from this site, right? That adds data, because what if you have 5 sites, right? Well, you got 5 sites and now you're looking at all these logs, you're like, oh crap, which goes where? But if you add that information, say, hey, these logs are from this site, these logs are from this domain controller, blah, blah. Here you go, you're set. Now, correlation, pretty simple. Taking those logs and linking things together. So, hey, I noticed the firewall was hit at this time, then this web server was attacked, then this machine was attacked. Correlate them. Okay, well, follow the path. Did they come into the firewall and then go into the web server and then go here? Or did they hit the web server and then go and pivot to the firewall? You know, those things you need to correlate those logs and put the event full picture. Visualization, this is exactly what it sounds like. Taking charts, graphs, heat maps, whatever you want, and making it look good so that you can present it to people. Yes, it helps you. Trust me, it will help you. But it also makes it really nice to present to people. And then reporting, summarize log data into structured formats. This is exactly what it sounds like for if you have like an executive who needs to see, hey, how many events do we have this year? Well, if you have a nice graph for it, reporting is much easier. That's why the visualization comes right before reporting. Okay, so now log analysis techniques. Pattern recognition, pretty easy. If you see a pattern, you see someone trying to log in over and over and over, that's odd. So that's where you're starting to look at that analysis. Anomaly, okay, someone logs in every day 8 to 5, they're working. One day they log in at 2 a.m. and start working, right? That's an anomaly. Correlation, again, we talked about it. You correlate different logs together to say, okay, I see the full picture. Timeline, pretty easy. Again, if that happened at 2 a.m., I'm going to follow that timeline. I'm going to start when the first instance we saw was and follow that timeline. And then, like it says here, analyzing these over time helps understand trends. So if you've watched him and every day he's logged in 8, every day he gets off at 5, that 2 a.m. is very weird then. Machine learning and AI, you can have AI take these logs and say, look for those patterns for you, look for those correlations for you, and it's going to learn much faster. Keep in mind, you want to do a mixture. You don't ever want to rely 100% on AI because it is wrong a lot. So visualization, exactly what it sounds like, making it look good for you. Statistical analysis, using statistical methods to analyze logs to provide quantitative insights. So we've analyzed 5 million logs and we noticed 100,000 odd ones, so the percentage of logs is that we have to actually analyze is much smaller, That's statistical analysis. So now working with logs, practical application. So here, again, I'm not going to follow this step perfectly because all they're doing is taking the logs, parsing them, getting the data that they want, and then presenting them to you. Now, I will say this, okay? This looks really complicated to people that aren't familiar with awk and sed. It's not. There's a couple reasons I'll tell you it's not. The main reason, you only have to do this once, right? So you have plenty of time. Take your time. Get this exactly how you want it. Get that data, and then do it once. And then now you make this a scheduled task, and it's going to just go through that. You don't have to keep redoing this every day or memorize this command or anything like that. You just make it a scheduled task, and then it will give you the data. And you can see this is just parsing the data, and then optional, use grep to filter specific entries. So they're using grep, then they sort them, and then they get rid of unique instances, meaning they're getting rid of duplicate entries. And then you can see we can go to this web server, and you can see here's the web server. And this is a poor example of a SIM, but this is what a SIM basically would do. It aggregates all that information, puts it in one spot for you. So now you might have 5 or 6 logs instead of just one, and they're all parsed. So now you have the date, the time, or the path of the log, the actual source here, and then all that other stuff, right? So all of this is just an easy way to view the data. Now I'll tell you, you want a better SIM than this, but you can search. That's huge. That takes a lot of the time that you would have had to go through the command line and grep and all that stuff for. So now, upon accessing the log viewer URL, which we have, what error does this log do? So what they're saying here, this one was confusing because I didn't really understand what they were saying. But if you go right here and you add a log, you add the log, this is what they want you to do. They want you to add the log, and you go back. They want you to go to var, and they're giving you it right here, var log web server. And like I said, this one was confusing because it doesn't really tell you. It says upon accessing the log viewer, show what error does that log show, but that log's not in here, so they didn't really specify that. So you have to go through and figure out what they had you do. But okay, so we are var log web server, and then we have r syslog cron log. So you can see if we do this one right here, and we open it, and it reloads, you'll see the one you'll get is, maybe, you'll get an error is what you get. Failed to read log, no date field, log cannot be merged. So this is good. You wouldn't want that because you couldn't correlate any of the logs. So what do we get? The error, no date field. Now, what is the process of standardizing parsed data into a more easily readable and queryable format? Normalization, that's right up here. They're going to talk about it. Normalization, standardizing parsed data. We just talked about it. What is the process of containing normalized logs to enhance the analysis of activities related to a specific enrichment? You're enhancing the ability of the analysis, meaning you're adding something that enriches the log. So that's exactly it. So now, conclusion, logs are important. You got to log, or else you're really not going to be, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. So make sure you're logging stuff, make sure you're understanding the logs, and make sure that if you don't understand them, you're taking some of these courses. When I say that, for instance, they're showing sims here, Splunk Basics, Incident Handling with Splunk. These are free tools. A lot of sims will give you free training on them. Make sure you're taking advantage of that. Now, you want to know machine logs as well, but keep in mind that you should be exporting them to a sim or to some centralized database, because you do not want to rely on the fact that you have to log into a machine after the fact and that log's intact. So hopefully you guys like this content. I know it takes a while to get through some of this stuff, but I want you guys to get the best information and also understand what's going on. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and thank you guys. Hope you guys have a great day.